Today we return to our exploration of the Book of Joy. The Book of Joy, that wonderful conversation held between His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The Book of Joy. And this morning we are looking at the strength of acceptance and living in joy. And through this living in joy, we allow ourselves to open our hearts and our eyes and our awareness to when the universe seems to perfectly align with what we're doing, where we're at, how we're being. To acknowledge that, to bless that, to know that Spirit is always with us. And the more we are grounded and aligned with who we are, the more we recognize how the universe shifts and moves and brings us these awesome opportunities. Sometimes we might think of them as synchronicity, or maybe we think of them as serendipity. I love that word, serendipity. Or coincidence. I think not. And a great example that I'll give you is one that just made me laugh out loud this week. So I'm a planner. Those who work with me know I'm a planner, and I plan my talk titles and series ahead. And I write little summaries, knowing that there's going to be a lot of flexibility when I actually go to write the talk, but I plan ahead. And I share my plan, of course, with Mary Ellen, so she can put it in the e-blast and announcements, and I share it with the music team, so they might choose music if they choose to go with a theme, and the platform leaders so that they can choose their meditations. So the beginning of April, I sent out my talk titles for April, May, and June. So this week, I'm massaging the material, and I look at the daily word for today. Now I'm talking about the strength of acceptance. Strength. Divine strength invigorates my body and quickens my mind. And I just laughed out loud. And I said, thank you, universe. Didn't plan it that way, but how many times does that happen? We don't plan it that way, and yet things come together. Things come together as if things are shifting and moving, as if the universe is actually conspiring to support us, which is sometimes the very opposite of how we feel about the universe. But what if the universe is actually conspiring to support us? Well, strength and courage are required to move into a place of acceptance. Strength and courage are required to move into a space of acceptance, because there is so much that happens in our lives and in our world that is just plain unacceptable. There are things that happen in our lives and in the world that are just not endorsable. And I don't even know if that's a word, but they're just not endorsable. We cannot affirm them. We will not affirm them. They are insupportable. And there's no denying that there are things that happen in our lives, sometimes on a daily basis, things that happen in our world that we choose not to affirm. But acceptance does not mean to support the insupportable. It does not mean to endorse that which is not endorsable. It does not mean to affirm the unacceptable. Acceptance means to concede and to acknowledge what is, to simply acknowledge what is, without our input of rejection or distancing, but rather through strength, we can lean into whatever that is. We can use that essence of the divine, our divine nature within us, to lean into that which is. And through our presence, it is sometimes possible to change what is in the future. For we know that facts change. Facts are fluid, but truth with a capital T is unchanging, unchanging. And when we come from the space of truth, of knowing who we are, of recognizing our divine nature and the divine nature in every other person within these walls and outside, when we recognize our oneness, we're able to move into a space of acceptance with grace, with grace. The Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu are two of the most intense, amazing, vibrant activists of our time. And they dedicate their lives to making a better world for all. And activism only works when we first recognize what is. We must first recognize what is before we can take action, change our thoughts, change our words, bring our presence to a situation that we wish to change. Archbishop Desmond Tutu did not accept the inevitability of apartheid, but he did accept its reality. And he worked to change what he could. He's not in denial. He was not resisting the process. He was taking his energy of light and love to the process. We are meant to live lives of joy. And this morning, I'm going to share with you some quotes from the chapter of acceptance, the only place where change can begin. Acceptance, the only place where change can begin. That's a message for each one of us personally, the only place where change can begin. There's a quote that the Dalai Lama has, and it's on the children's village. And it's actually a translation from a very famous quote, although not to me, but I guess to Tibetan Buddhist, of the Shanti Deva. And the Dalai Lama quote goes like this: "Why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied? Why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied?" And you know it's coming next. "And what is the use of being unhappy if it cannot be remedied? What is the use of being unhappy if it cannot be remedied?" This seems so simple, and yet this is the essence of the message that the Dalai Lama has lived and been able to accept his exile from his home in Tibet without being morose, without being defeated, without being depressed. He can live a full life of joy, even with these facts, The Archbishop says that when these things happen in our lives, we turn our face to the wind. So I was saying about leaning into, we turn our face to the wind, knowing that this is the storm we're to walk through, that this is the storm that's been presented to us to walk through. Resistance will not help us, although we may temporarily resist. But accepting and leaning into and facing that wind, knowing this is the storm for us to move through right now. And it's not forever. It's just for right now. The Dalai Lama says that acceptance, whether we believe in God or not, allows us to live in the fullness of joy, and it allows us to engage in life on its terms without railing against the unfairness. Acceptance allows us to live life on its own terms. And in Tibetan Buddhism, there are two terms that they use, two phrases, two descriptions, and one is dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A. And this is suffering. And the Dalai Lama compares it to a wheel, an axle that is broken, and everything is difficult, and it's hard, and it's bumpy. And what they say in Tibetan Buddhism, that birth is dukkha, that aging is dukkha, that death is dukkha, that our resistance to anything that is not going the way we want, our separation from one another, our feeling of separation from God, grief, despair, tribulation, that all falls under that term. And that through acceptance, we move into sukha, S-U-K-H-A. And that's a Sanskrit word for joy. And it means authentic happiness. It means a quiet joy. I envision joy wrapped in grace. We all want to be there. That's where we all want to be. And we can get there through acceptance. And that doesn't always appear to be our natural state of being as living the human condition and expressing our human self. You all are familiar with that little cartoon, Maxine, the really crabby woman? Yeah. So I saw a cartoon where she's leaving the doctor's office. It says MD, in the door behind her. And she says, I just learned that I have IBES, irritable because of everything syndrome. Okay? We know people like that. Sometimes we are people like that. Where we go in through life just looking for things to bump into, to be irritated about. And I really hesitate ever to assign anything to age, to getting older. I really resist that. And yet it seems that as our joints stiffen up a little bit, it's harder to be as flexible in this world. It's more difficult to have that bounce back reaction of not falling off center. But through awareness, we can do it. Through awareness, we can leave Maxine behind with her irritable because of everything syndrome and move into that space of acceptance. Acceptance for what is and acceptance for our divine nature, that we may have a role in changing what is in the future. It's kind of in all of our job descriptions. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for, to accept one another, to include one another in our hearts, in our prayers, in our thoughts. The other day I was on Zoom in the prayer session, the Silent Unity prayer session, and Aaron Andes and Deborah Butler alternate leading. And we get on there and we gab a little bit first. And Aaron was saying something about something happening in his life. And he says, she was giving me a hard time. And then I remembered, she's not giving me a hard time. She's having a hard time. And when we can make that shift, we now have compassion for that person. How can we help them have a less hard time? And it's easier to shift there when, of course, you're not the target of the hard time. But we can do that. We can do that. We can take ourselves right out of, that person's not giving me a difficult time. They're having a difficult time. And how can I help them? How can I be the presence of God? How can I be the presence of love? How can I be the presence of compassion? That's the question. So we all need to send our loving energy to Maxine, because boy, she really needs it. And so as we've looked at the Book of Joy, we started out with widening our perception, looking at our angle. We've looked at our ability to be humble, of moving life with some measure of humility. We've looked at our ability to laugh at ourselves, to laugh out loud. Laughter is good for us, the strength of laughter. And today we're looking at the strength of acceptance, to accept our lives with all its pain, its imperfections, and its absolute beauty. For that's who we are. And that's how we live in this world. This morning, I'm going to share some scripture from Philippians, and I'd like to share a little bit with you about Philippians first. So Philippians is one of the unattested letters from the Apostle Paul to his church in Philippi. And scholars now believe that the Philippians is probably a composite of several fragments of letters. But when we look at the 4th chapter, this is most definitely a thank you letter to this community. The Apostle Paul has been imprisoned yet again, and they have sent him gifts. And this letter is in response to the gifts that they have sent, and in really response to the fact that they've let him know that he's not forgotten, that they are thinking of him, they're holding him in their prayers. Now, if the Apostle Paul had a favorite church, it would be the church in Philippi. He planted that church, he established that church, and it was the first church in what is now Europe. And in this letter, he communicates the love that he has. He lets them know that they live in his heart. And he comes from such tenderness in this letter, which is not often what we think of with the Apostle Paul. One of my favorite passages is his letter to the Galatians when he says, "You foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you?" This is a different Paul. This is a softer Paul. This is a Paul that's coming from his heart space and honoring this beautiful bond, this simple and beautiful bond that he has with these people. And he's sharing with them his heartfelt lessons. He's sharing with them how he's living in the space of God, for he really wants them to live in that space. And he's writing to them more as a brethren than as one of authority, apostolic authority. He's speaking as a brethren. And I can identify with Paul in this scripture, because this church right here was my first church. Right here, standing on the shoulders of those that had come before me, standing on the shoulders of all the congregants and the boards that had throughout the 37 years that you had operated and loved and prayed in Key West. And I've been connected with many churches before and after seminary. Before I went to seminary, I spoke at a church for 6 months every Sunday. But I wasn't their spiritual leader, and I didn't take care of the day-to-day operations of the church like a senior minister did. I didn't get to be their pastoral, presence, and I didn't get to plan. That was here. Now, I didn't plant you. You were planted by our minister emeritus, Reverend Evelyn Casper, who planted and nurtured and established and loved and still loves you from right up the key, still nurtures you in her prayers right up the key. So as I was holding this week, I thought, maybe you planted me. Maybe you planted me in my ministry. You planted me, and I am grateful. So now let's hear what Paul, before I cry more, has to say. So he's responding to the letter, letting him know that he's not forgotten. He says, "Now, not that I complain of want, for I have learned in whatever state I am in to be content." That, my friends, is acceptance right there. "I know how to be abased and I know how to abound. And in any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, of abundance and want. I can do all things in him who strengthens me." I can do all things in him who strengthens me. This is a love letter. This is a love letter to the universe. Let us accept our own Christ nature. Let us accept all the ways that the universe conspires to support us and plants us, puts us right where we are meant to be without our knowledge often, where there is something to be learned, something to be shared, a connection to be made. Let us continue to be aware of that so that we can open our hearts to more and more alignment, to more and more acceptance of expressing the divinity of who we are. I have had so many experiences of that in this past week, and this morning I'm going to share 3. The first one was several months ago. I saw this article about this peace sign that was made on the beach somewhere in the Northeast by huge shells. And I was so excited about it. And I was like, yes, that is so perfect. That is so perfect. And I sent it to the board, and some of the board responded that they'd love to do that. And at the next board meeting, they were very reticent. They really didn't want to remind me that shells are not actually indigenous to the beaches in Key West. That was not going to deter me, however, because I went online and studied on how you can make sand sculptures. Now, I still wanted to decorate them with shells because I wanted the shells to say peace, love, abundance, unity, all those things. So my next part of the plan was that I was stopping in Clearwater for the birthday of my 5-year-old grandson. I was going to be there for his birthday. And I thought, I know what I'll do. So I won't fly to the Keys. I'll get buckets, and I'll fill these buckets with shells, and I'll figure out how to get to the Keys with my buckets of shells. And my daughter said she'd drive me. I go to the beach. The shells were like that big. And they were really, really tiny. Okay, that wasn't going to work. So my daughter brings me here with my empty buckets. I'm still holding out, though. I'm still holding out. It's going to work. So last Sunday, Mother's Day, I go into the office, and I see on the shelf a basket of shells and a treasure chest filled with shells. I had left them here on purpose. They were gifted to me by the Unity of Fort Myers community when I did my internship there. They were perfect. I took them home. I wrote peace, love, abundance, unity, and they were what we used. It all came into alignment. I didn't need to fret at all. It was perfect. And then there were those who came to help put it together that brought their own shells and stones, and it was, I hope you look at the pictures. It was wonderful. So the second story is, last Sunday, I told a couple people I'm going to be shopping around for a beach. I'm not sure where we're going to put this peace sign, but I kind of have this idea. It's going to go to the right of White Street Pier, kind of next to that white platform where people do yoga and stretching and Tai Chi. And I told them I'd be there at 8:00. So I got there at 8:10, maybe 8:12. I was a little bit late. And as I pull up, there's very few footsteps on the sand. It's pretty smooth. And I recognize that there is a humongous peace sign that someone has scooched out in the sand with their feet. And my first thought was, well, I wasn't quite thinking that big, but if that's what they want to do, I'm in. So I get out of my car. I can't find anybody. A woman is getting into her car next to me. Her hair's wet. She's been swimming. And if you remember Monday, it was really windy, like the water was splashing up against the seawall. So I talked to her for a few minutes. Then I get my buckets out because I want to practice. Okay, I want to know what I'm doing. All right, I am a 1 on the Enneagram. So I get the water and I'm making my little sand sculpture to see how it's going to work. And actually, your sand is so great here because it's got that coral stuff in it and it just really packs well. So I see the woman that I was talking to get out of her car. And she's standing under the tree there by the picnic table watching me. Okay, so I go over and I said, did you happen to see who made this peace sign? And she said, yes, I did. And I said, well, are they still here? I'm looking around and she said, yes, they are. She said, it's me. I make one every day right here. Well, at first, I freaked out a little bit. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to know this person. I don't know this person. And but we talked and I was not supposed to know that person. She does this and she shared with me that she's living on a boat and a little bit about her life. I told her what we were going to do, that we were going to, do this peace sign. And we just talked back and forth. And through the conversation, she mentioned something about Bahama Village Music Program. And I said, so you know Kachin, Catherine Duncan's daughter? And she said, yes, I do. And I hesitated for just a few seconds and I looked at her and I said, you know Catherine Duncan. And she burst into tears. She burst into tears and she just needed me to stand there and be with her and be a witness to her. And then she said, as soon as I saw you out there, I thought of Catherine Duncan. I said, that's because she's here and she wants to play in the sand. She's here with us. So I thought to myself, if I'd been 10 minutes later, she would have been gone. Or if I'd chosen another beach or started somewhere else first or said 9:00 instead of 8:00. And I just said, thank you, because I was blessed from the experience. And the third example on the third day, the third example is that we all met Tuesday afternoon, and there were 8 or 9 of us out there. We had to take a lot of breaks. It was really hot, making this not as humongous, but still big enough peace sign sand sculpture. And it took us a couple hours, because we did take a lot of breaks. And then we're ready to decorate it with the shells. And we had so much fun placing the shells all around unity, love, abundance, peace. It was awesome. And then a member of our group went over to the white platform because we saw people start to gather over there. And they went over there to see if a member of their group would come over and take a picture for us so we could all be in the picture. And they said yes. So someone came over and took a picture. And through that interaction, we learned that what was going on the platform is actually a birthday party. It's a birthday party for Trayvon. And his mother was there and his brothers and cousins, and he was not. He was killed a few months ago by gunshot in Tampa. He was born in Key West. His mother was born in Key West. His grandfather still lives here, but a few years ago, his mother moved to Tampa for a job and took the kids with him. So all of us are taking time to go over and be with this family. And I spent some time with the mom. And after I think I gained her trust a little bit, she said to me, when I left to come out here today, I asked God for a sign that Trayvon is at peace. And she pulled up and she saw that peace sign. And she sends her love to every one of you in this community. Because as far as she's concerned, we answered her prayer that day. And we don't know. If a member of our group hadn't gone over there and just happened to ask a member of their group, we wouldn't have known that whole story. And how many times in your life, maybe how many times in a day, do you bless others in a way that you don't know and may never know? Because you are the divine in this human suit. You are the presence, the very presence of love and peace and abundance and acceptance. You are compassion living in this human suit. And so, embrace your divine nature. Express the being of who you are and trust that the universe is shifting and moving to support you in the most benevolent way. And may you live a life of great, great joy. And so it is. God bless you.